Welcome to the newest episode of the European Republic, the podcast where we talk with people from the Europeanist bubble. And today I have an interesting guest, Ivo, who is part of a movement that is very close to my heart. He is the lead for policy and program at Astra Europa, and he has written much of our manifesto. Welcome, Ivo.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Great having you. Let's start maybe with who you are. What's your background and how did you come into European politics?
I studied international economics, first here in Holland in Tilburg. Then I did my master's in Antwerp. So that was my first experience of living in another country within Europe. Which I think tends to make you more European-minded. But I was before that, like my bachelor's thesis was already on the success of the euro. I was interested in how successful has the euro been. Did this project make sense? And I've always been interested in the European Union. I've always supported the project, but then living in two different European countries makes it even more alive. So then I spent some time in Belgium, where I did my master's thesis on fiscal transmission mechanisms, so fiscal policy, especially in the context of a European Union.
Which is a very interesting topic to this day, because we don't have unified fiscal policy to this day, but we have a euro in many countries. So maybe that's something we can talk about later on.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's a great background to have, I think, economics, because Europe started out as a Euro economic project in many ways and isn't driven still by economic integration.
Yeah, and this is actually also my entire reason for studying economics is political, because I was always interested in politics. But I thought that to really understand how society works, you have to understand economics. If you don't understand economics, you always have a sort of limited vision on how society works, and how can you make good decisions politics-wise if you don't understand like this broader scope. So at least it was my reasoning for studying economics in the first place. So it was always a means to a more political end. I do have to confess that I spent quite some time studying.
Like every good European does. I think study quite long compared to, for example, the Americans who basically all start working at 21.
Yeah, I was definitely not one of those. So, but to be fair to myself here, I only discovered at a later age that I have ADD, which made it more difficult for me to concentrate on my studies, which is also why I did a detour during my bachelor's of becoming a professional poker player, which was also quite an interesting experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. Especially, as an economist, you're probably good with numbers, so well equipped for all the card games like poker and blackjack. But how was it? Did you were like full-time poker player?
Well, officially I was still a student, but I basically stopped studying and started playing poker because at first I did it just for fun, but then it became quite lucrative and I started making good money with it. And then I thought like, well, my studies aren't going so well. This is going pretty well. Let's maybe focus on this. But yeah, I wasn't going to tell my parents that I quit studying to become a poker player. So officially I was still studying, but I wasn't doing much studying back then.
That was within your bachelor's or
within the bachelor's, yeah.
During your bachelor's.
Yeah. So there was 2 to 3 years that I spent mostly playing poker, which was pretty fun. It was a good time. But
I can
after a
imagine.
time, at some point, it was like, okay, am I really going to be doing this for the rest of my life? I feel like I want to do something more meaningful with my life than just playing poker. It's fun, it makes money, but I'm not actually contributing to making the world a better place, which is important for me. So then I thought, okay, let's get back to studying. And it's around this time that I found out about my ADD, which gave me some coping mechanisms for finishing my studies. And then the rest of my studies went much easier after that.
I can relate a bit because I have like ADHD, but thankfully I got diagnosed quite early on, got some therapy already as a teenager, and it had a massive impact on my grades after getting some therapy and some insights on how to navigate that. So
Yeah.
that's it's a pity that you only discovered it so late, but better late than never, right? There are people who only realize that in their 50s or something like that.
Yeah, it's more common nowadays to like detect it early, but
Yeah, I
it's
mean, it's also, well, people are more aware of it. I think we are at this point now that it's getting overdiagnosed almost because it's become very mainstream to talk about it.
yeah, true. And I think parents are also pushing it, like when they see their child failing grades, they're like, well, something must be wrong. Maybe you can give them medication because, of course, my child is smarter than this.
Well, sometimes it just isn't. And sometimes it can be, right? ADHD or ADD or something else, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so and then
With your
after,
poker playing, I still
yeah,
find that fascinating. Do you still play nowadays?
no, I played a few tournaments like 2 years ago, in which I also won some money again, which I didn't expect. I made a final table somewhere and made some decent money. But I noticed that most of the money I made came from playing cash games, and I noticed that it is, if you play at a high level, it is sort of like playing sports at a high level. Like you have to practice regularly. If you don't, you just start falling behind because everybody else does.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just start losing your edge. So I'm definitely nowhere near as good as I used to be. And I don't want to spend the time required to play at this level. And now that I know, I've played at that level and also for those stakes. So now playing for the smaller stakes just feels
It doesn't have the same.
like grinding an hour to win €5 just
But do you like your math skills or economic training? Was it any use in poker, or did you start already before that?
Well, yeah, of course, having a good understanding of percentages, especially. So it's a lot of statistics. So if you just have a more natural understanding of statistics, it becomes easier. But the statistics of poker aren't very complex. So it's pattern recognition, of course, helps. The better you are at pattern recognition, the easier it becomes. Yeah, but it's the statistics are not all that complicated.
Yeah, I mean, very easy to learn, but probably hard to master. Still very impressive. You're the first professional poker player I've think ever talked to. It's not usually. I mean, also because I'm not so much into card games. I always like played chess in school, university, and that was without financial incentives. Nice, but then you went on to start to focus more on your studies. and also driven by your interest in Euro politics and the Euro. What were your results? Was the Euro a success back when you wrote your thesis? And would you say it is today?
Well, yeah, so that was interesting because, of course, like you said, the European integration had been started as an economical project. But looking at it from a purely economic perspective, the euro at that point, and we're talking 2010, 2009 even, wasn't a success from a purely economical standpoint. So even there, I had to conclude that the drivers of this integration were political. Like there were all kinds of political gains for the integration of Europe, but you couldn't measure them in purely economical gains.
Yeah. I mean, the euro historically also was basically something the French especially wanted to pick the German economy after, especially, I think, I remember correctly, Helmut Kohl basically made the deal back when after the wall fell and Germany was to be reunified. That the French basically said, well, Germany can reunify, but we need in the long run some securities that the Germans don't become too strong, and a common currency will tie the economies together. And I think the Germans negotiated, on the other hand, that the European Central Bank will be in Frankfurt and not in Paris. So still there's some control on the money printer, if I remember correctly the story.
Yeah,
know
that is, I think, largely correct. But what we gave up by getting a central euro was the ability to conduct individual monetary policy.
Yeah.
Because of course, before you could like devalue your currency to regain your competitive status. Once you have a shared currency, you lose that instrument, the monetary instrument, which is also why I focused on in my next thesis on the fiscal instrument for rebalancing economies. But there was, losing the monetary instrument was painful. I think, of course, we made some economical gains in being able to transact more easily across Europe. So there are definitely economical gains there, but especially for economies which weren't doing so great, the fact that they couldn't rebalance, especially like in the wake of the financial crisis, what you saw back then was, for instance, massive youth unemployment in Spain, which was sort of a direct result from the inability to manipulate your own currency, because Spain was at that point much less competitive than Germany, and the euro was valued more on the performance of the German economy than on the Spanish economy. So it just didn't work that well for the Spanish economy.
What's maybe for people who are not that deeply knowledgeable about economics, what's the mechanism behind basically the monetary policy and the causal that Spain's unemployment rate went up?
Yeah, so what you normally have in a situation where your economy isn't very competitive, what you can do is devalue your currency, which makes your goods and services more attractive internationally. In this case, Spain didn't have this instrument available. So what happens instead, like if your goods and services are overpriced relative to like the quality or the efficiency with which you produce them, you need to bring down the costs. And costs are largely labor costs. And the only way to bring down labor costs is fire people and rehire new people for a lower wage, because people generally don't accept wage cuts. So that's typically how rebalancing works, is by first having mass unemployment to the point where people start accepting lower wages.
Yeah. I think in Spain, and on top of that, also you had the factor that Spain has very hard like labor laws. It's not that easy to fire people, so they were also very cautious on hiring people, right? There were hiring freezes, if I remember correctly from the literature I read.
Yeah, so that's one of the characteristics of the European economies. We are more protective of our labor force, but that has, there's positive and negative effects. It of course means that you cannot be fired as easily as in America, where you have these mass layoffs. But it also makes our economy less dynamic. So yeah, that's
and less
gains and losses.
dynamism. Yeah, and less dynamism leads often to like higher unemployment and more stagnation.
Yeah, we have a problem with keeping like more zombie industries alive in Europe. Which you notice now we're losing our competitive edge internationally as Europe, which is of course what Mario Draghi also flagged in his report. And this is partly due to not having this dynamism in our economy. So we need to be mindful of this and introduce ways of pushing this dynamism and increasing our competitive edge, because we have protection mechanisms that are there, that somewhat protect our population in the short run, but make us less competitive in the long run, vis-a-vis America, China, mostly. Yeah, so this is something to be very mindful of as Europeans, that this is a risk we have.
Yeah. So basically we, through a lot of regulations, but also like labor laws, we protect jobs and employment in the short term, often also companies, but we also prevent often the like necessary creative destruction that would like maybe wipe out some old companies, but also like make room for new companies, new startups, new business models. And in the result, we have quite, at the end, we lose also the jobs we wanted to protect. Like we see that in Germany right now, where all the old giants like Volkswagen for the car industry, they are not competitive anymore because they're just a big blow that has stagnated. But there are countries in Europe that do that better, right? For example, the Scandinavian countries, they usually manage to be more dynamic, like Sweden or Denmark, without abandoning welfare and labor protection completely.
Yeah, so I definitely believe it's possible, but it's just something to be mindful of. When you have higher levels of labor protection, you need to find other ways of creating dynamism in your economy. And I think indeed in Europe, we are wary of the creative destruction. We don't accept the destruction part as easily. But it's also necessary for an economy. Sometimes old companies need to fail and need to go under to make space for new companies. I think this is something we need to become more accepting of in Europe.
Yeah, basically accept the destruction part so we can also have the creative creation part again. This ties back very nicely in like policy we need to have for Europe. But maybe before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go a little bit back to your evolution as a pro-European activist. We talked about you were into economics, especially because you're interested in European politics and the euro. What was your further path, and how did you end up with Astra?
So my first like real job was at Deloitte as a system administrator, which was it was good to like understand how office work works. So I did that for 1.5 years or something. And then the first job I had after my master's thesis was business analyst for a Belgian bank, which, of course, it's a bank, so it's sort of, I expected it to sort of tie into my economics background, but it turned out the business analyst was more of a technical analyst, like on the IT infrastructure, which I at that point was totally unknowledgeable about. So it kind of surprised me that they hired me. So I spent the summer just learning about how IT systems work. It took like at least 2 to 3 months before I became useful at all. But then it turned out I had a knack for IT systems because, in essence, computers and IT systems are just logic machines. And if you're good at logic, you're good at IT. So once I got to understand all the specific concepts that are relevant for IT, I became quite good at it. And then there was this legal project called PSD2, Payment Service Directive 2, which was implemented, I think, around 10 years ago now. And that required banks to open up their systems so other providers could build systems on top of it. So the philosophy behind it was your bank data, your account data as a customer belongs to you and not to the bank. So if you want to take that data somewhere else, to, for instance, to another company that makes some kind of useful household app from it, it should be possible. But what that meant in practice was that banks had to open up their IT infrastructure for all kinds of startups to start building their business on top of the bank infrastructure, which was, of course, banks were used to being like very closed systems. But then suddenly they had to open up, and they suddenly became business-to-business IT providers, which was a totally novel concept for them as well.
It was because of this regulation.
Because of this regulation, yeah.
The European regulation.
Yeah. And so this was very interesting because, of course, there was European regulation, but European regulation then has to be turned into, at that point, I was in Antwerp, so it was Belgian regulation. And so I got to experience firsthand like how this works, because we had a lot of interaction with the Central Bank of Belgium, because there was a lot of uncertainty on how to implement this. So the banks were talking with the central bank on how this policy should be implemented. And they were like, we cannot do this. This is unmanageable. This is unrealistic. And on the other hand, you have these startups that were like, we need this access, we need that access. And so there was like a live discussion in the market on how to implement this regulation. So it was very interesting to get to experience firsthand how European regulation impacts the market, in this case, the banking market. And what I did then, so what I just told you, like, it was a novel concept for the banks, but I noticed that the people at the bank didn't quite understand what was happening. So they were used to like implementing new regulations. And what usually happens is, you have this new regulation, okay, you implement the project and it's done and you move on. But in this case, it was like, you implement the regulation and you open up a whole new side of your business that you didn't have before, and you need a way to manage it, and you need a way to, like, there are opportunities, there are threats, there are service levels you need to provide, and it's an entire new thing you need to think about. And I noticed that people didn't understand it. So what I started doing was building this presentation deck to educate people in the bank on what was happening. And at some point, people started understanding, and they were like, oh, yeah, we see what you mean. We do need to do something with this. Do you want to help us write a strategy for this? Which, of course, I did. So what we did then, we spent like a year with a small team coming up with the open banking strategy, which was a strategy for dealing with this open side of your bank, which then became an official part of the bank's policy. And then they had to implement the strategy. So then I became the epic owner and product owner of the implementation. So what we did was build out the team that manages this and the first use cases. So what we did was work with a Belgian startup that offered automatic cashbacks on purchases if you purchased at certain, like it was sort of how do you call this? Instead of like you have these commercial folders that you get at home, here was like it happens sort of through the bank app. You have this offer straight in your bank app, but even if you don't see them, if you purchase at one of these companies, you get an automatic rebate to your account. But in any case, it was an interesting project. It was fun to work with such a startup and experience the startup energy. It was quite different from the bank energy. And it was an interesting learning experience in building out such a new part within a large organization. So that was quite interesting. But after a while, I felt like, again, I wasn't contributing enough to society. Like the thing we did, like the cashback app within the bank, it was a fun gimmick, but is it really important? Is it does it matter if you get like 50 cents back on your sandwich purchase? It's
it can matter to some people. This is a lot.
It can matter. It can matter. So it was okay. It was interesting, but I wasn't quite satisfied enough with it.
Yeah.
So then I started thinking again, okay, what are like important society-wide topics that I could contribute to? And my search led me to the energy transition. I think that the energy transition is probably the biggest project of this century. So I started looking for jobs in the energy sector, of course, from my IT background, because that was the easiest way to get entry into this energy sector, because I was already familiar with implementing IT systems, and IT systems in the bank and IT systems in the energy sector are quite similar. So that's how I ended up at my current job, where I build out a central data analytics platform for the Dutch energy grid, which helps us optimize the energy grid. So maybe you're aware, but we have a lot of congestion problems in Holland on the energy grid. So that means in practice that new homes that are built cannot be connected to the energy grid because there's no room on the energy grid. Companies cannot expand because there's no room on the energy grid. So and there are two ways to combat this. We have to like physically expand the energy grid, like new cables in the ground. And the other way is by optimizing the energy grid we already have, which is where the thing I do comes into play, where we bring together like the usage of the entire energy grid, so we can make better use of it. We know where the slack in the energy grid is and how to better optimize it.
It's fascinating. I mean, and you do that just for the Netherlands, or is it?
Yeah,
because, I mean, there's a lot of energy trading and going on between the European countries. So you don't.
It is, but the international energy trade is still somewhat limited. Also, the international transmission mechanisms are also still, not where we would want them to be eventually. But no, our focus is exclusively on the Dutch energy grid.
Mhm.
So that's my professional trajectory.
Which is very impact driven. I like that you like looking where you can have societal impact.
Yeah, that's definitely an important driver for me. Like, of course, I like earning money, but money is never my main driver. If I have enough money to live on, I'm fine. I don't need all this fancy stuff. It doesn't mean that much to me.
Mhm.
What I care much more about is making an impact, which is sort of what's leading me into Astra.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what really reawakened my political ambitions was first the Russian assault on Ukraine,
Mhm.
um, which feels like a threat to all of Europe, and then subsequently the aggression and attacks from America are officially still partner, but it's becoming a very contentious relationship.
Yeah. I mean, with those kinds of friends, you don't need enemies anymore, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
It's not a very equal partnership any longer. I mean, probably never was, but it got really dark now with the second Trump administration.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I never imagined it would go this poorly, but here we are. But I think it's a good reality check. It's in the end, I think we're still used to a world where America and Europe are somewhat intertwined, but over the decades, they have just drifted further and further apart. And
Hmm.
Europe and America are quite different worlds. And I think whereas during the last century, Americans felt more connected to Europe, I think modern day Americans don't feel very connected to Europe anymore.
Yeah.
Also because like demographically, most of them don't have European ancestry anymore. So it's why would they feel connected? So I think it's natural for America to drift away and no longer treat Europe much differently from how it treats the rest of the world,
Which isn't necessarily always very nice.
which isn't necessarily always very nice. Oh no, so that's very good to realize. And on the other hand, of course, we have the rise of China, which is to be seen how China will treat the rest of the world once it becomes more powerful. So far, it's been rather subdued, but that's also that feels like uh, a strategy.
Hmm.
Um, like bide your time until you're strong enough to do what you actually want to do. So and you were seeing it everywhere, like the return of power politics. It's since the Second World War. Of course, you had it somewhat between in the Cold War between America and Russia, but that's I think our generation kind of got used to the idea that power politics is no longer a big thing in the world anymore.
Hmm.
Like we have this international set of rules, and but that was the exception. And it seems we're returning to what has been the norm throughout history, which is power politics. Uh,
Unfortunately, yeah, it looks like increasingly this like somewhat very like optimistic phase of like globalization, international rules of the 1990s, early 2000s, when everyone was thinking, well, democracy and liberalism will spread everywhere and we will just cooperate and the UN will just kick every dictator's ass in Iraq or wherever, and the future will be bright. I think this optimism is gone, and also this idea that, well, it's cooperation and being nice to each other rule the day. This approach doesn't have. I mean, maybe it was always maybe a little bit naive, but yeah, we have
Well,
power.
I'm not sure if it's naive, and I think it's still something to strive for, but it breaks down when international power relations shift, as it does now between America and China. Like, as long as America was unthreatened as the hegemon, the system worked. But now that the power balance is shifting, yeah, the order we had isn't stable anymore, and we need to find a new stable equilibrium. And then you notice that rules are only, if people no longer want to abide by them, and especially if the strong ones no longer want to abide by them, and you have no way to enforce them, then rules are just, like what civilized people do between each other. But they're not ironclad, and they are easily broken, and there are no guarantee of safety or anything. So this is the reality check that Europe is currently facing. We need to be able to provide our own security, because we just cannot count on America to do it anymore.
Yeah, they don't play like benevolent world police any longer. I mean, one can debate again how much they really did that and how much it was just their own interest.
True, but at
them,
least their interest largely coincided with European interests. So from our perspective, it worked. There are from not from the rest of the world, they may have experienced this differently.
I think especially in the Middle East or like Central Africa, there are diverging opinions. But like for Europe, the coalition, the cooperation with the United States, especially Western Europe and also Eastern Europe, was very positive. I mean, in the 1990s, all the Eastern European countries like Poland, Romania, Czechia, they basically begged to get into NATO and join the Western world. And today they are very happily members of the EU and of the wider Western world. And still, I mean, very optimistic about the US. It's starting to wane even in these countries. But yeah, I think for some time we all wanted to be somewhat Americans or American allies and enjoyed it in Europe.
Yeah, and I think to a large extent we're still like in the American ecosystem. Like, of course, we're still under the American security umbrella because we cannot stand on our own two legs yet for security, but also like for our cultural ecosystem, like the movies we watch, the music we listen, the online discourse, it's all very Americanized, and most of us live in a very Americanized world.
Yes. I mean, also, the global infrastructure for the modern world is very Americanized. All the financial systems, the internet, the infrastructure of the internet with the domain servers, much of it is American controlled. Parts of the financial systems are also controlled by, I think, like something like SWIFT is like controlled by Europeans, but much of basically all of something like GPS, basically the entire digital infrastructure of a modern world is American, and the trade routes and the security umbrella for them, it's very American.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you even see that like in the cultural discourse. Like, we have largely adopted the American culture wars, which are American problems, but they are also playing out here. I vividly remember during COVID, when I was still living in Antwerp, and we had these the George Floyd killing, and then the subsequent Black Lives Matter protests. And suddenly there were like Black Lives Matter protests popping up all over Europe, and I was like, "What's going on? This is a an explicitly American problem of police killing black people or incarcerating mostly black people. Like, I'm very certain that I saw it in Belgium, I saw it in the Netherlands. We don't have a problem with police violence here. We don't have a problem with police killing black people here. It's just not something that happens. But still, we have everywhere we have this massive Black Lives Matter protests because people see these things online and they want to be part of it. And they just, everyone, especially during the Corona times, of course, because everyone was living online and everyone is living in this Americanized online culture and starts playing it out here as well.
Yes, which is very absurd, especially with this police thing. The same thing we had in Germany with George Floyd protests. And I mean, in general, like European standards alone for policing are wildly different from the US, right? At least in most European countries, to become a policeman, you have to go through years of training to police academies. While in the United States, often it's just a few weeks of training and you get the badge. It's like way lower standards they have in training. They have way more violence, also because gun ownership is so widespread. And they have also this history of slavery and racism, which we don't have in that way in Central Europe. Because, I mean, European powers had slaves, but they had like slaves in colonies. And that was mostly the British and the Spanish. Like, not, for example, the Polish, who didn't even have colonies in Africa or anything. So we have very different realities here. But as you said, the discourse sweeps over. And I think that's where we see like the hegemony of the United States most visibly. Well, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think this is also a challenge for us, like as Europeanists.
Mm-hmm.
The lacking of a European discourse is partly also because the entire digital world is so Americanized. So I think we're now starting to build out our own infrastructure more, but I noticed it in myself as well. Like I was very involved in the 2020 elections in America, and much more than I was in any European elections because there's so much more appealing. Because of course Americans are more showy anyway, and European politics is designed to be pretty unintelligible and drama free.
Yeah.
But it's kind of weird that we're so much more invested in what happens politically over there than what happens politically here in Europe. But it's also because there is no ecosystem to support this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically I mean, most people watching this podcast will watch it probably on YouTube or maybe Substack. And Substack and YouTube are both American. Some will watch it on Spotify, but which is Swedish, but that's also like a tiny part of discourse, like Instagram, YouTube, all the platforms where nowadays discourse is happening. X, they are American owned and they are flooded with American content. And often people, as you say, they know more about what's about the mayor of New York when they know maybe about the president of a neighboring country.
Yeah.
Like most people couldn't tell you who's the president of Slovakia or Czechia right now, but they can tell you Sahmadi is the New York mayor because we are so exposed to this discourse, right? That's very true.
Yeah, that's something that we hopefully can help to change, which I think you're helping with stuff like this, these podcasts. Of course, it's still small, but it matters that all these things are popping up where we have explicitly European discourse on European topics. Even if it's still on American platforms, it happens if we have, it matters if we have these kind of programs, I think. So,
yeah. But maybe one step back, why is Europe for you so important? And why did you join like Astra and contributed to it, especially a lot as our like chief manifesto architect?
Um,
What's the main drive for you?
I honestly think that we run the risk of being sort of colonized by larger powers than us if we don't unite. Like, as I said, we see the return of power politics, and power politics is real. And power politics is you do what you can because you're stronger and you can. And
Yes.
if Europe stays divided and weak, and we are losing influence in the world, also economically, we are a smaller and smaller slice of the world pie. I think this century may turn out very poorly for us if we don't manage to unite. And yeah, I'm of course very invested in Europe. I as a European, but also I noticed it more now I've become a father. That I'm even more invested in safeguarding the future of Europe. And I'm tired of all the cool project stuff happening elsewhere. I want to I want more cool stuff to happen here. It's I would like us to be more optimistic, dynamic, energetic, ambitious. Yeah, it's I've always been. I think possibly my main driver for getting into politics, like long time ago, was that I really dislike being governed incompetently. So I really dislike if people decide over my life and they make poor choices which affect my life negatively. So that's just something that, that really frustrates me.
It frustrates a lot of people. I mean, that's yeah, it's a very valid reason, and a good. I mean, that's why everyone should be somewhat politically active. A good citizen is one that is informed, that votes, that engages in civic society, parties, and so on. But you have also like a very concrete thing, I would say, vision how like Europe would basically stop wasting its potential and making bad decisions. And you contributed that especially by the manifesto. Do we want maybe go a little bit through the manifesto of Astra Europa, or do you want?
Yeah, for sure. Well, indeed, I contributed, but the first thing I did was bring together like much of the stuff that was already lying around. Like we have a group of people with ideas, and many good ideas, I think. Oh no, the set crashes.
Yeah, that already happened. It happens sometimes. It doesn't matter. Yeah, sorry.
Welcome back. So the first thing I did was simply put together everything we had and try to find the common thread and work from there. Of course, I also had my own ideas. But I think many of the policy ideas aren't very novel or like things we haven't heard before, because I don't think that our problem is that we don't know what to do. The problem is that we are unable or unwilling to execute what we know needs to be done. Like, for instance, it's very clear with the Draghi report. Like,
yeah,
I think most Europeans agree that this is what should happen, and we seem completely unable to enact these policies. Like, it's not a matter of not knowing what to do. It's a matter of being unable or unwilling to execute. So, and that's I think a lot of what Astra brings brings policy-wise is a lot of common sense policies, a lot of stuff that many people will agree on. It's not like weird out there stuff, like, and I'm somewhat partial to grand visions or grand new plans, but I don't think that's what we need. What we need is just to do the common sense things that we know and that most people agree on, but to execute them competently at a European scale. So,
I agree very much here.
Yeah, and this is also why I think that something like Astra is very important. Of course, we are inspired by what Volt has done, like build a pan-European party. And I think this is the right level to do politics in the 21st century. And I know you think so as well, that we need to have like multiple parties like Volt at the European level, because currently if you want to vote for a European party, there's just one, and any healthy political landscape has more than one option. So what we need is more parties at this European level. So I think this is what Astra offers, and just what I said, largely common sense policies executed competently at the European level. This is I think this is the main thing that we bring.
Yes.
Aside from the what I think does make us different is this more ambitious, daring, optimist, daring to think big energy, which is missing in Europe. Of course, at the European level, the way it's designed, Europe is very bureaucratic, and we cannot have grand strategy at the European level because we don't have the political mandate. It's all consensus building and mostly technocratic rules and not grand vision or So this is something that is lacking anyway at the European level, but I think even at the national level where you could have stuff like this, it's still lacking. This I don't know how to call this energy, but I think this is something that we try to reignite in Europe, which current political parties don't really do.
I mean, that's basically give Europe a little bit more ambition and trying to overcome this stagnation and this lack of action. Because, as you said, right now the incentive structures are very national oriented, and also how the EU is structured. It just is constant consensus building between like 27 heads of states who have all their, and some especially like foreign policy or like strategic things, their own veto. And we have to overcome that. Otherwise, Europe won't act effectively as one bloc. And if we don't do that, we will get divided and colonized. Those are the Draghi report you said. I mean, that's a perfect example that basically we know what to do, but we have this institutional inertia, this tragedies of the commons basically often that the incentives are not aligned towards that, and everyone in Europe is doing it her own thing, and at the end barely anything of a Draghi report where actually everyone agrees should be made real is not happening right now. So maybe the question is, common sense is sadly surprisingly uncommon if it comes to our political system. How do we get more of this common sense into it? And how does this common sense actually look like? What are the concrete ideas we have to implement?
Of course, for us, our like how we implement common sense. Yeah, that's hopefully by creating new parties that are based on common sense. And of course, you would want to design your system in a way that it's easier for people to do the right common sense thing instead of the politically expedient thing or the self-interested thing. And currently it's like doing the latter is often easier than doing the former. So, and politicians are just people as well. And people in generally do largely what's easy over what they know they should be doing.
It's just human.
Yeah, so that's but I don't have concrete answers on how to design the system this way yet, but I think this is something we need to think on. For the rest, like for us, I think our main policy goal, of course, is to create a sort of federalized Europe, like a political union of Europe.
Yeah. Like also our first guiding star of the 12 guiding stars. You conceptualize the first one is European Federation, which is our first and prime goal, because once Europe is united into a federation, it has the leverage to actually do a lot of the things that needs to be done, that need to be done.
And I think this is important because we're not trying to create a political union for the sake of creating a political union. We're trying to create a political union because that's the only way we can get the skill to do the things we need to do, which is like create a common standing army. And to have a common army, like the only way to tell an army what to do, to tell soldiers to go and fight somewhere, you need a political mandate.
Yes.
And you have to have, and if we want a European army, you need at the European level to be able to have a political democratic mandate. Same thing for foreign policy. Like we all notice the frustration of Europe not being able to speak with one voice to America or to China. And we have 27 different voices and we get divided and they try to play us out against each other. And like one of the common jokes on the American side is often, if you want to call Europe, who do you call? Like who is Europe? Who picks up the phone if you call Europe? And also for this, like what you want is to have a common foreign policy because we need our European scale and our European weight to be able to sit at the table with America and China. And the only way you can have this is by uniting politically, because you need to be able to set a single foreign policy for all of the European countries. So I think these are the biggest drivers for a political union: the common defense and the common foreign policy. But then also for the economic integration, like it would be so much, we could make the European economy so much more efficient by coordinating more things on the European level. Like currently you have still this patchwork of 27 different tax structures, pension structures, corporate regulations. It's very difficult for European companies to scale. Like for instance, if you start a company in America and it becomes successful, you find product market fit, and you can just instantly scale over all of America and often beyond even. But in Europe, you're quickly crashing into like the borders of your nation. And then you notice that for the nation next to you, you need a different set of rules. You cannot just expand there. There are all these barriers to expanding or growing your company. And then it's like, do you even want to enter this nation? Because then you need to comply by a different set of rules, and it takes a lot of effort to comply with this different set of rules. And so maybe you just stick within the nation because it's easier. And it's also like for professionals who want to work cross-border, it's very difficult regulation-wise. There's so many of these barriers because of our fragmented regulation landscape, if we could make for a lot of these things singular European regulations instead of many national regulations, we could become much more competitive, much more dynamic. It would benefit us economically greatly.
Mm-hmm. Which is also like the idea of EUing, at least part of it, that you have like a standardized corporate or business entity across Europe. But the main issue of having like still like currently 27 different legal systems won't go away, I think, until we have a proper European federation. Because right now it's still way too fragmented legally, and that costs and creates a lot of inefficiencies. Beyond what needs to be like done now, do you have like a vision, an idea how if Astra gets successful and Europe gets its shit together, basically, how will Europe look like, let's say, in 20 years? What's the kind of Europe you want your kids to live and prosper, basically?
Well, in 20 years, I hope we have the full political union, like for all current member states in 20 years. I hope we have Europe where we have a more flourishing European cultural ecosystem, where we are much more invested in, like all of us, emotionally invested in Europe and our neighboring countries. Like I love us to be as invested in Europe as many of us are in America, which
or better, even more.
yeah, or even more, because of course it makes sense. We live here. It would make sense to care more about Europe than to care about America, but that's not the way that our societies are currently structured. I would like us to have really ambitious world-leading projects, like the stuff that people worldwide look to Europe for our leadership, or for inspiration, for I want us to be able to be proud of Europe, to marvel at the things we as Europeans can do. And of course the basics, like our common welfare. I'd hope that we would have differentiated from the American worldview of having GDP and capital growth as your only holy grail of societal progress.
Oh, but that's something I didn't expect, I must say, because you are an economist from a background. Is not GDP growth one of the holy cows of economics?
No, even the creator of GDP said this is a terrible metric to use as your goal for society.
Do we have a
but of
better
course,
one?
that's what we ended up doing.
Yeah. Do we have a better metric, or?
Well, there are many metric systems proposed. We have actually one in the manifesto, which is the OECD Better Life Index, which is a much broader set of goals than just GDP, which includes like housing and health and the community and like the stuff people actually care about. Like GDP is only a means to an end. If it doesn't materially improve the lives of people in your country, what does it matter if your GDP grows? And I think this is something that also clearly separates Europe from America and from China. Like America is very totally individualistic and cares about individual winners. On the other hand, in China, it's collectivist and they care about collective success. I think here in Europe, we have this hybrid where we still believe the individual is the highest unit. But we believe that like the dignity of each individual matters and the collective success of each individual. So we care more about not having people become totally destitute or having like 90-year-old grannies having to work because there is no functioning pension system. So we don't accept like what America accepts, that people just completely fall between the cracks and the losers of society. We still celebrate winners, but we don't accept losers as much. We value human dignity much more.
We have basically, you could say, a balanced approach, very, and it, I mean, in this sense, also Astra is a movement par excellence because we want to basically embody this centrist, balanced approach that isn't extreme in either direction and respects the individual human.
Yeah, I think that the approach still is valid, still holds. What we need is better execution. But I think the European vision is absolutely different from the American vision and the Chinese vision. And I think the European vision is important and something we need to protect and and further. I saw this that the Pope even said that Europe is a gift to humanity. Precisely because of this, because of our dedication to the dignity and well-being of the individual. And yeah, I agree. I think the European vision for how society should function and what's important is something I'm fully behind, and something we can be proud of, and something we should protect and nurture.
Which is, I think, very remarkable that even like an American Pope says that, no? That Europe is like this beacon and like also cradle of his human dignity. And I mean, it's also due to our history. I think we have had a very bloody history as Europe, and we have reflected and developed upon it. And especially now as the United States are slipping into a more kind of oligarchic system and getting more sinister, we are a beacon of hope.
I truly think so.
Yeah. And the vision of Astra, one could maybe say, is that we want to make this beacon of hope shine brighter.
Yes, because it's a precious thing and not something that is guaranteed to sustain in the future unless we protect it and work to nurture and foster it and protect it. It takes effort, because if we take it for granted and become complacent, we might lose it. And I think it's something very important.
I agree very much. I agree. Europe is very precious, and that's why we have to fight for it, and also to fight that it, for one, remains as a great place for liberty and dignity as it is right now, but also that it starts living up to its potential. And that's what Astra Europa is for. That's why we wrote the manifesto. And maybe these are great words to end on, and also a call to action to our listeners today. If you want to do something for Europe, go to Astra Europa. economist.eu and join us. Start working with us on this vision and make Europe strive for something greater for the stars.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we need to do it together. Like we need all of you. We can't do it just on our own. So
yeah,
let's bring as many Europeans into this project as we can and build a better future together.
yes, and we will do that over the coming weeks and months. Thank you, Ivo.
Thank you.